Why does Chinese culture consider daughters to be a small happiness?
Okay. The most basic definition is simply this. All children are happiness, but they prove that both the husband and the wife are fertile enough to have children. Children are happiness. But if you have a son, that's a big happiness, because that son, in the Chinese thinking, will stay with the family all the way until the parents die. Now that means the parents are caring for the child, the boy child, as a small child, loving him, nurturing him, trying to build as much rapport with him, because they're going to depend on him in old age when they're infirm to take care of them. And in terms of the Confucian tradition, he will also be responsible for carrying out the Confucian rites at funeral and maintaining the Confucian practice of having people bow down before their ancestors and the elderly within the family. The boy can do that because he's always going to stay with the family. Chinese custom, though, has had daughters marrying out into another family. So the amount of money they spend or effort they spend on raising that girl daughter is going to be a benefit they're giving to another family. Now, of course, they're getting a benefit because their son's going to marry outside the family and bring a daughter in. But still, from the standpoint of the birth of children, it looks more like there's a small child. Now, it's incredibly important to remember that Chinese hierarchies always depend on reciprocity. So there's a giving back. Yeah, you can be the small happiness, but there will be a reciprocity that's involved. For example, a mother who loses her daughter to another family because she keeps her son and because her son marries, she gets a helper. The new wife married into the family is under the direct control in the house of the mother-in-law. So the mother-in-law, if she has a son, gains prestige as soon as she has a son, because the knowledge is when he grows older, she'll get a helper. If she gets a helper, and that helper also has a son, she is in Fat City. She has a son and a grandson to help her out throughout life. And there's an economic reality there. Historically, there was no Social Security at all. And today in China, in rural villages, no Social Security. If you want to be taken care of in old age, you better have a son. That's why the Chinese even allow adoption of sons outside the family. It's so important to have someone in the family who will take care of them in old age. And from a religious standpoint or from the cultural ancestry worship standpoint, someone to carry out the rites. That's it. Now, how has that gone forward? We're now in the 21st century, and we've just gone to a 20th century where a big chunk of the 20th century was devoted to a new Chinese government policy called the one-child policy. It was introduced because China feared that its population growth was so fast that it would outstrip their resources. So in about 1980, they introduced the one-child policy. Almost immediately it ran into trouble in rural areas, because in rural areas there was no Social Security. Slightly better in the cities. In the cities where people worked in factories, they did get a pension. So the pressure to have a son was far less in the cities. On top of it, in the cities, the apartments were small. So if you were a worker in a factory, you got a free apartment, but it might be just one room or two rooms. And if you have an apartment that small, you're not going to have very many children. Also in the cities, how many children you have is going to be obvious to everyone. And if there are fines and penalties for having a second or a third child, you're going to pay.
And that relates to Confucianism because your neighbor will tell on you.
Oh yeah, because, and for several reasons, that neighbor's only going to get one child. How's he going to have one child himself, which might be a girl, and the guy next door has a daughter, and by gum, he's out trying to get a son? No, we can't have that. So you see how the pattern begins to work. The economic realities, though, I believe are the most important. The most telling issue for the one-child policy in the cities is simply the cost of living there and the cost of living in a very small apartment. So the one-child policy worked sort of on economic grounds in the cities. It never worked in the countryside. Almost from the beginning, there were exceptions. If you had a daughter, okay, well, you can try again to have a son. What if you have two daughters? Well, we're going to probably stop.
What about if you have twins, like twin girls?
Twins. Twins are
Twin boys.
the magic number. That's 2 buns in the oven, and that means that you can keep both. You don't have to kill them. So it doesn't have to be infanticide. And infanticide is one of the responses to the one-child policy if your first child was a girl, sad to say. Abortions also, if you detected by ultrasound that you're going to have a girl, there was some infanticide or abortions as a result of that. But you know, before we knock the Chinese on this, we need to know how much evasion there was. In the countryside, there were all kinds of cases. I saw these for myself. I saw a mother with 2 small children. One child was about this tall, one child was about this tall. I said, how come you have 2 children? She said, no, they're twins. Well, they're obviously not twins, but what she's done is she had 1 child, or she was going to have a child. She goes back to her home family, has a child, then has a second child, and comes back to 2 children. She says they're twins. Just one's taller than the other. Well,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of that kind of resistance. Why? Because the underlying cultural principle was still intact, and that has survived. Now today, in the 21st century, they stopped the one-child policy, even in the cities, because in the cities there were some people who were very, very wealthy. And they now don't have a 1-room apartment, they have a 6-room apartment, and they want kids because the Chinese have always had fairly big families, and if they can afford it, by gum, they're going to have it. This goes back to a fundamental argument in this course of the durability of culture. It's not that culture never changes. It does evolve and change. But culture is really very durable. And one of the final lessons I would have in this course would be if I could get people to see not only are they a part of a human community that is 7 billion people large, different colors, different pigmentation, different hairs, different languages, different cultural backgrounds, but biologically, in the heart of every cell of every human being is a nucleus that has a DNA strip that's 3 billion double units long, or 6 billion overall. Individually, everyone is different, but it's only a small change. This is true not only over the 7 billion people, but it stretches back 100,000 years to Africa.
To the New Guineans?
No, to the South Africans. South Africans. And when they went abroad, one of the first places they went was to Australia, which was then physically joined to New Guinea. And that's where the Papua New Guineans came from, and so on. But if we could get to see that we are linked to all other 7 billion alive today, and we are also linked backwards in time, at least 100,000 years. I'm not going to go into evolution or creation. Where did they come from? Not going to go there. I'm just going to say 100,000 years ago, we started having them, and they are linked to us.